morning. Thank you for joining me this morning. You're watching CTN 10, and we're happy to be here in your living room with you. I want to thank you for tuning in today. I have Mrs. Dee Harris with me this morning. She's back in action, and we've got to cover this very important subject of stress management and mindful eating, Dee. I know that in your private practice, she's a registered dietitian, a very, very good one, and we are going to tap into her brain so that she can tap into ours. And just a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you, Janet. Thanks for having me back.
We don't even think of how stress affects us. I mean, we were talking about this earlier, how, like, what is stress?
Some people don't even know they have it. They've been stressed their whole lives, so that's the big problem. Stress is that feeling of fight or flight, of being in that mode all the time. And that's what stress is that fight or flight when you're tensed up. And a perfect example is when you are driving on I-75 and somebody cuts you off. You slam on the brakes, you know that's stress.
Okay.
Right? But what's happening to you is some things are changing physiologically in a case like that. Okay. Your blood pressure rises, you are excreting hormones, your cortisol goes up, your neurotransmitters change. It changes body chemistry at that moment.
So obviously stress, is it always bad or is it good or bad?
Stress, I mean, in a case like that, you're on I-75, you just avoided an accident. That's a good time to have stress.
Okay.
But if you are constantly in that stress mode, number one, the main thing that I'm seeing in my office, which is why I'm glad we're talking about this, is that people who are in chronic stress mode cannot produce digestive juices. So what happens when they start eating, they're not eating, they're not breaking down their food. So they're landing up with a whole bunch of gastric issues,
and
complaints.
We have such a huge population that we're seeing more and more people with all kinds of irritable bowel syndrome, symptoms and all of these things. And it sounds like what you're saying, that a lot of this is physiologically a response to stress.
So one of the things that we do in the office is we identify if a person's in stress or if they have a history of stress.
Would this be an indication?
Yeah, when their hands are clenched all the time. And one of the things that we talked about earlier off camera is that one of the things I ask is, do you clench your teeth at night when you're sleeping? Do you grind your teeth? Do you have what they call TMJ, which is that lockjaw? Okay.
Wow.
That means you're stressed in the middle of the night. You're even stressed in your dreams. Isn't that horrible? Another way to find out if you're stressed is anxiety. If you're always anxious, if you don't sleep well, those are signs of stress.
When you say sleep well, what would it be? Just the fact that you're not sleeping for an extended period of time, or short breaks in your sleep habits?
It could be both. It could be the breaks, not being able to get to sleep. A lot of times I have people who can't get to sleep because they watch TV before they go to bed, and you know that glaring TV in your eyes is actually not giving you the opportunity to make the melatonin that you need to sleep.
Interesting. And yeah, depending on what you're watching on TV, I mean, if you're watching a negative news report, that's certainly not going to help you sleep well.
That's right. So depending on a few other things too, but it could be also that if you're watching TV at night and you're watching a very an action-packed show, or if you go to the movies and it's very action-packed and you get very irritated by that, then you come home and you can't sleep at night. That's another thing. Another reason we look at sleep is sleep apnea. There's so many people that have sleep apnea, which is they stop breathing in the middle of the night.
Wow.
And then they catch their breath and they start breathing again.
Is that related to stress, Dee?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
A lot of times that's related to weight.
Okay.
So people who are very overweight sometimes have snoring problems, and if you have a partner that says, oh, you were snoring all night, if that partner can kind of tune in to that stop and start and that stop and start, then you should get a sleep study.
So it sounds like, eating stress can affect eating, which can affect being overweight, which can affect everything.
Yeah, it's a real cascade effect. It's really the domino effect, and so what we are trying to do is get to the cause and treat the cause, and not just the symptoms. Not just, give somebody an acid reducer to, stop the GERD.
Or a sleeping pill or an anti-anxiety medication.
Right. So there's techniques that we can use for stress management. And one of the things that I'm really concerned about is digestion, because as a dietitian, I'm looking at how they utilize food. And so I'm looking at their digestive process. So what I try to do strategy-wise is get people to be more mindful in eating. And that is what I know we were going to talk about.
What do you consider a stress eater?
Well, a stress eater is somebody who is so stressed out and will open up their cabinet or their refrigerator, grab something, and a perfect example would be a bag of chips, and just one right after another, and just mindlessly eat.
So they're not necessarily eating because they're hungry, like...
No.
Okay.
They're not tuned in, those people are not tuned into their body as far as the hunger and the need for food. It's not the need for food in that case, it's the need to satisfy something that's going on in the brain.
Do you think that that type of eating can develop into like a eating addiction? Like, how people smoke and drink. I mean, is that the kind of same thing? I mean, they're looking for ways to alleviate stress.
It could be. I mean, I've seen people with obsessive compulsive disorder, and there is that even with food. So we have to, again, look at strategies and say, okay, how can we address stress and alleviate that without using food? And sometimes it might be just take a walk. Get out of the kitchen, get away from food.
It's interesting that you mentioned take a walk. When Thomas Jefferson was the president of the United States, I read a biography of him, and he used to solve all the White House. He would go every day for a walk, and the walks would last between 2 and 3 hours. And I was thinking about what you said about stress and everything. I was thinking he wasn't just going for those walks for walks. He was solving, it said in the book even, he was solving all the White House problems on these walks.
Well, what's so amazing is that when you can reduce stress, you have more mental clarity.
And we all need more of that.
We all need more of that. You can lift a little bit of that brain fog just by de-stressing. So there's different strategies that we can use, and again, walking exercise is great for de-stressing. A lot of times I'll tell people breathing exercises are really, really great. Deep belly breathing. If any of you do yoga, you know what kind of belly breathing I'm talking about. It's that rhythmic breathing.
Are you going to give us an example?
Yeah, I am. Actually, when we're doing deep belly breathing, it's really coming from your belly and not from your chest. So you can actually, if you hold your one hand on your chest and one hand on your belly, and then you take a deep breath. But
Through
you
your
want
nose or your mouth?
It doesn't matter. You can take a deep breath.
I'm getting stressed out about this.
Nope, you want your belly to go out. If your belly doesn't go out, then that means that you're breathing from your chest. You want your belly to go out, and then you rhythmically go in and out. It's like 4 counts in, 4 counts out, 4 counts in. I mean, it's a slow, rhythmic.
So you're taking, and what you're suggesting is that this deep rhythmic breathing that some people who take yoga classes, but essentially it helps them relax and de-stress.
Right, you're changing from what we call the sympathetic nervous system, which is that fight or flight mode, to the parasympathetic nervous system, which is that relaxation mode. And what's so awesome about that is that it changes your blood pressure. I know cancer centers are using this technique for patients who are really stressed out prior to going through into treatment.
Wow.
And prior to having testing done. And we want to lower their blood pressure.
It's funny that you brought that up, because sometimes my husband and I, and he's a few years younger than me, we'll go to like a drugstore and check our blood pressure. and mine's always a lot lower than his, and he'll just sit there. He's like, well, we're going to have a competition. And he'll just sit there and close his eyes and relax. And in like 5 minutes, that number comes down. Like, then I have to do it to get lower than him. You know, it's like a competition. But it is true that just sitting there, de-stressing, closing your eyes, and kind of relaxing, taking some breaths like you described, can really lower that blood pressure.
Yeah, but also what it's doing is it's preparing you for digestion. If you do that prior to eating, it's preparing you for digestion. It's called the cephalic phase.
Okay.
So you're actually preparing the stomach to make the gastric juices, the hydrochloric acid that you absolutely positively need.
You need that, don't you?
You do. You need it to break down protein.
What about people that, you know, a lot of times they'll say, well, I'm having some, you know, discomfort in like this acid reflux, and then they go to the drugstore and buy all these over-the-counter, you know.
Well, all the over-the-counter, there's some that are better than others, but if they're
doesn't that reduce the stomach acid?
If they're using what we call a proton pump inhibitor,
right,
which is like omeprazole is the generic term for that.
Pepsid,
Tagamet, you know, Zantac, all of those. You know, they're okay for a very, very short period of time. You don't want to have them for a long use. And in fact, even on the FDA actually put a warning on the box.
Wow.
Saying that it's only going to be, should be used for 10 days.
Wow.
So a lot of people have been on them for years.
Right.
So that's why they come to me and they land up having lots of food sensitivities. They're starting to be sensitive to a lot of different things. They land up with more stomach acid, more stomach pain. They land up with more, so they're not digesting the food. What's happening is there's problems with the assimilation of their diet, and it's causing pain because they've changed the ecosystem in their GI tract.
So you're saying this breathing is going to help us
it's
digest
so
our
simple.
food. Okay,
It's
so how many
simple.
breaths, like give us a guideline.
So prior to eating, remember many of us still pray prior to eating.
Right.
That is more than just giving thanks. It's a wonderful thing to give thanks, but it also is preparing you because you're breathing while you're doing it. Unless you're rushing through, of course.
Yeah, like what about the good Lord, good eat, come on, let's eat thing?
Yeah, that's a
little
rush.
too short.
That's a rush
right?
job.
Yeah.
So what we're really trying to do is be more reflective, meditative, and breathe. And basically, it's maybe just doing a rotation of maybe 4 to 10 breaths is enough to really get your body in preparation for that mindful eating.
So what you're saying is being more aware and exercising these breaths. And that's going to probably take practice for many of us who are not accustomed to doing that. I mean, many of us pray before what we eat, but we don't really actually practice the breathing. And it would be interesting to see what kind of improvements people have by doing that.
Yeah, let me know.
What about people that are like eating in front of the TV, or even people that stand up and eat? I mean, you can't actually be relaxing if you're doing that, right?
No, you can't. And then that goes into the next phase of actual digestion. And what we want is mindful eating. We want you to be aware of what you're eating. So, you know, make sure you're sitting at a table when you're eating, that you are aware of the food in front of you, and that you appreciate the colors, the textures, the flavors, the smells. I mean, that is mindful eating, to be in the moment and to appreciate the food that's in front of you.
So you can't do that if you're watching TV and you're kind of doing this action.
No.
Or what about when people go to the movies?
Yeah, that's a very, very good point, because they're sitting there.
Are they appreciating the popcorn?
Probably not. Although they will tell you they can't go to the movies without it. You know, but they have to have it to watch a movie. But that's habit and not hunger. So I think, you know, just understanding when you're eating, understanding the level of hunger, so that you know, do I really need to eat now? Am I really hungry? Why am I eating? So it's that body awareness.
You know, it's interesting, body awareness, and then also I was at this one clinic once, somebody brought in a cake for somebody's birthday, and the way that they positioned this chocolate cake was almost catty corner by the hall. Everybody had to walk by it to go into the office, and everybody had to walk by it when they had to go out of the office. And I made a bet with one of the nurses. I said, I bet that this cake will be gone by noon. I mean, it was, birthday, I'm thinking first thing in the morning. And it's like you said, being aware, we're just eating it because it's there. And most of us do that, and that's a very bad habit. And you brought up a good point. That's habit. We need to pay more attention to what we're doing, don't we?
We absolutely do, and I think it's really, again, it's understanding, being aware of the food, being aware of your surroundings, being aware of why you're eating, and also accepting your body. That's another big deal. I mean, when it comes to mindful eating, some of us beat up on ourselves.
We do.
And because, if you are sitting there and eating a whole bag of popcorn or eating, something that you think you shouldn't be eating, and then say, oh, well, I really blew it. Or I really, well, That's
why I don't like when people say, oh, these are the good foods and these are the bad food. Because like you said, if people are eating for the right reason, because they're having that physiological response, like, when you're hungry, you start getting hunger pains. But when people are not hungry, they don't get those.
Well, the other thing we have to understand is what we're feeding our bellies. When you're hungry, a lot of people think, oh, well, I can just go to a fast food place and just, fill up the tank. I mean, they think it's like pulling into a gas station and filling up the car. It's not the same. We have to select the right fuel for our body. Do you realize that every single cell in our body is interpreting what we're eating? It's affecting the DNA, it's affecting the way the cells live, the way the cells die. Food is information for every cell in our body.
That's an interesting way to look at it. And do you find, Dee, that usually with stressful eating, or when we're really not paying too much attention to what's going in our bodies, that there are certain foods that tend to be more popular than others?
Yeah, actually there are. I mean, and it also depends on what's going on physiologically in your body. So let's say you have high blood sugar. Let's say you have high insulin levels. And a lot of people have high insulin levels even before they have high blood sugar.
True.
So those insulin levels are going to dictate whether or not you're craving sweets.
Like, I mean, if I'm stressed out, I'm not going to say, I need a piece of celery right now.
You're right? And it depends on what's going on physiologically. You might be one of those people that needs to go after something sweet. Or let's say you're so stressed out all the time that your adrenal glands are shot. I mean, what we can do is burn out our adrenal glands as far as the amount of cortisol that we're making. And if the adrenal glands have what we call adrenal fatigue or adrenal burnout, you're going to crave salty. So it depends on where you are. So it's really interesting to know your body.
Know your body is what you're saying is very important. And then also knowing your surroundings, it sounds like that's really key.
Yeah, I mean, if you're distracted or something, I know we spoke off camera about if you are forced to eat lunch at your desk every day.
A lot of people do that, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, I'm guilty. Guilty as charged. I mean, I am guilty. But a lot of times what I'll do is I'll push my computer away from me and make that my eating space. And so now all of a sudden I'm not distracted with my, with what I was working on. But now I've got a little space that I can enjoy my salads, which is what I normally bring for lunch.
So when you say enjoy your salad versus just eat it, like you mentioned some sensational ways of experiencing these
you want to try it?
Let's try.
Okay, so this is a little exercise that I actually, you're going to take one grape.
Just one?
Just one.
Oh, okay.
Just one. We're not, okay, so you're going to put it in your mouth. Well, first of all, smell it before you put it in your mouth. All right.
Okay.
And look at the color. It's pretty, isn't it?
It is pretty and shiny.
I know. And it's organic.
Okay.
So now you put it in your mouth. Don't bite it yet. So you roll it around your mouth and just feel the texture. Okay? And then you're going to bite it. Taste the sweetness. Okay?
Keep chewing.
And keep chewing. Don't swallow it whole. That's another thing. People eat too fast and don't masticate, don't chew their food enough. So we're getting food that's going down into the stomach.
You want me to chew this all day?
Yeah, eat it.
Like I could
Yeah,
keep chewing it all night.
Well,
too.
as long as you're enjoying it, right? So what are you experiencing? How do you feel about that grape?
Well, that's a good point. Now that we're thinking about it, it was sweet, crunchy even, and juicy.
Right, and what about the temperature?
Cool.
Uh-huh.
So your mouth, when you're, like obviously if I was sitting watching TV or watching a movie, I probably would be completely ignorant of those things that we just described.
But if you're aware, you eat less.
Wow.
So when you're doing that kind of exercise and when you're aware, you will eat less.
So we can do the belly breathing.
The belly breathing.
And then we can do some
chewing,
of these exercises.
Right, and then you just appreciate your food. I mean, it's a gift, and it's it's nourishing our bodies.
If you're going through a drive-through, it's pretty hard to appreciate your food with one hand on the wheel and one hand in your mouth, right? Hand to mouth action.
That is not really a good habit.
Not a good habit.
Not a good habit.
A lot of people eat that way though, Dee.
I know.
60% of all meals are eaten in the car. That's a lot of meals.
That's a lot of meals. That's a lot of car washes.
There's a lot of there's a lot of drive-throughs to accommodate.
Exactly. So what I tell people is if you have to do that, if you can't go into the restaurant, try to make time for lunch. Try to make time for dinner. Try to make time so that you're not forced to do that.
Sure, that's a good idea.
The other thing that I'll tell people to do is if you're really hungry and you're in the car, instead of stopping at a fast food restaurant, I always bring a bag of nuts. I buy these little snack bags. I love them. And this is
the little snack bags.
These are little snack bags. So this is portion control. So I'm watching the portion size. I'm not doing this a whole can of nuts, a jar of nuts, and just eating mindlessly. I've got my little snack bag of nuts. So I know this is going to have to last me, right?
Right.
So if you're in the car and you're starving, I always keep a little bag of nuts, and that's what I'll eat instead of driving through a drive-through.
Good thinking. So it's planning ahead too.
It's planning ahead. It's strategizing, and I'll try to discourage my patients to try to please not utilize those drive-throughs. I mean, if you have to go to a fast food restaurant, we look at better choices.
And there can be some good choices, but I think you brought up a good point. We need to be aware of our body. Are we really hungry? If somebody, Dee, says to you, well, I'm hungry all the time, that's not normal, is it?
No, then we look at what they're actually, I look at blood sugar. That would be the first thing I look at.
Because if their blood sugar is abnormal, like high, then that could be a symptom, right?
Absolutely. So we look at blood sugar. Then if they're still hungry all the time, we might even look at what they're actually eating. I mean, are they eating foods that are super low fat? Those type of foods don't satiate you.
Okay. And when you say satiate, give you that sense
of satisfaction, that satisfied that you can hold for maybe 4 hours.
Gotcha. Now for someone, let's just say normal physiological person and body function, what can a person expect on a daily basis? Like, most people in this country eat breakfast at 8, eat lunch at noon, and dinner at 6 p.m. But if they're really giving a lot of attention to their body and being mindful, like you're saying, then would you find that you're always going to be on that schedule?
Well, it depends on their lifestyle.
And wouldn't it depend on, like you said, about their food choices too?
It would be, you'd have to look at their food choices. Quite frankly, if I saw a pattern like that, I would always give them a snack in the afternoon because 6 hours is a long time to go between lunch and dinner. And chances are that's when we get into big trouble if you haven't eaten anything and you get home from work or wherever you are and you're starving.
And you start grabbing things.
That's when you start grabbing. So strategize and say, okay, I'm going to have my nuts in the middle of the afternoon with a bottle of water or lemon waters or herbal teas or something. But the other thing that's good about these is that you can have this with fruit, and it makes a great snack. having some nuts and a small apple would be a great snack in the afternoon. That will hold you for dinner.
So a small snack can actually offset. I think the big danger then is waiting too long to eat when you're actually famished, and
Right.
then at that time you're eating so quickly it's hard to be mindful because
It's
you're
very
just
hard.
shoveling.
And then it takes 20 minutes for your stomach to tell your brain that you're full. So by the time you're shoveling it in prior to eating dinner, and then you're sitting down and eating
done in
dinner,
like 3 minutes.
exactly. And then
You're
all of a
still
sudden
you're like
and right after dinner you feel, oh, what did I do?
right, because you're still eating because you ate the quantity that you could have eaten in the 20 minutes, but because you were eating so fast, you actually maybe ate twice the amount of food. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. So I think we have to really be mindful of how much time it takes for us to eat, and put your fork down between bites.
That's a good idea.
You know, if you're watching weight, using smaller plates is a really good
I have
thing.
a plate this big. What do you think of that?
What are you putting on it?
Well,
That would be great for nuts.
right. That would be a great plate. So small plates, because you know some of those plates come really big.
I know, and then they pile them up.
Platters.
They're platters. You go to a buffet, and people loading up these platters. I mean, I especially see it when they're on cruises.
What about if they go to a seafood buffet? Any buffet, really.
Any buffet.
They
I
think
mean,
if they can get it on their plate,
then it's fair game, right?
right.
It's still going to translate into calories. It's still going to translate into, probably more than what our body needs.
So let's just review the important things that Dee shared with us. Number one, we have to realize that stress is normal, right? That whether we are having good stress or bad stress, that stress is just a part of everyday life, and we've got to know and recognize how it affects us, and then being mindful of what we're putting in our bodies, being mindful of our surroundings, and making efforts to, I think a big thing, especially in this country, we try to do so much, especially a lot of multitaskers. And so maybe just singling some task individually and focusing on one thing at a time, like eating.
Exactly. And your body will thank you.
Your body will thank you. And of course, I want to thank you for coming today.
And thank
because
you.
these are some things that we really don't think about. And a lot of times, I mean, we know that people are on the go. People are busy. Moms are trying to get their kids to soccer. And a lot of times it's easier just to go through that drive-through. And we're hoping that with the information that we shared with you today, that maybe even packing some little snack bags for the kids in the car, or even if you're picking the kids up from school and then you're going to a soccer practice, you bring them a nice little sandwich or something to hold them over. So thank you again for being with us, and I want to thank you especially for tuning in today. We'll see you right here next week on CTN.
Thank you.